The New Mexico wind screamed across the mesa as Bartholomew Bart Grimsby crawled through the creosote and ocotillo, his legs shattered beyond repair by the mining sledgehammers they'd used to pulverize his kneecaps and ankles. Blood trailed behind him in the dust, marking his painful progress across the unforgiving terrain. Each movement sent waves of agony through his body, but the alternative, lying still and waiting for death, wasn't an option for a man who'd spent his life fighting for others' survival. At 58, the former territorial mine safety inspector had examined thousands of underground operations, prevented countless cave-ins through rigorous enforcement, and spent 25 years bringing protective standards to the dangerous world of frontier mining. His weathered face, once respected in mining camps throughout the territory, now contorted with each excruciating inch forward. The sun beat down mercilessly, baking his skin and drying the blood that seeped from his mangled legs. He'd never expected to be crippled and left for dead by his own mining consortium supervisor, betrayed for the crime of refusing to ignore deadly safety violations that would maximize silver extraction while sacrificing miners' lives. The betrayal cut deeper than the physical pain, a lifetime of service repaid with brutality. "You're too cautious for modern mining, Grimsby," Supervisor Blackstone had sneered as his hired thugs positioned the heavy sledgehammers over Bart's legs. The memory of Blackstone's cold eyes haunted him now. "This territory's got no use for inspectors who can't tell the difference between safety regulations and profit optimization." Blackstone wasn't just any supervisor. He was a Harvard-educated businessman who'd come west with Eastern money and ruthless ambition. His tailored suits and polished boots stood in stark contrast to the dust-covered miners whose lives he gambled with daily. His voice carried the refined accent of Boston society, making his cruel orders sound almost civilized. The optimization had been Blackstone's scheme to eliminate all safety protocols, forcing miners to work in conditions so dangerous that cave-ins and explosions were inevitable. When Bart discovered the conspiracy and refused to certify the death trap mines, Blackstone had decided that a tragic mining accident would solve his problem permanently. "Should have stuck to checking timber supports instead of checking my authority," Blackstone had laughed as the hammers destroyed bone and cartilage. The sickening crack of his bones still echoed in Bart's ears. "Maybe the coyotes will appreciate your attention to worker safety." The thugs had been thorough, methodical in their destruction of his legs. They'd taken turns ensuring that every joint was shattered, every bone splintered. Then they dragged him miles from camp and left him for dead, confident that the desert would finish their work. Now Bart dragged himself through the Palo Verde and Beryl cactus, his destroyed legs trailing uselessly behind him, his mining career seemingly ended by the very tools he'd once used to test structural integrity. His throat burned with thirst, his lips cracked and bleeding. 3 days he'd been crawling, surviving on morning dew and the moisture from cactus pulp. His once sturdy frame had withered, his clothes hanging loose on his diminished body. In the distance, he spotted buildings clustered around a natural well, the first sign of civilization he'd encountered since crawling away from Blackstone's torture chamber. Hope flickered in his chest, but experience had taught him that hope was dangerous in the territories. Still, he had no choice but to continue toward the settlement, each movement a testament to his stubborn refusal to die. The mining supply depot sat beside an artesian spring, surrounded by carefully maintained equipment and safety gear that spoke of someone who understood both mining operations and worker protection. The water from the spring formed a small pool before continuing downhill, creating a patch of green in the otherwise brown landscape. Several cottonwood trees provided shade, their leaves rustling in the hot breeze. Bart collapsed at the wooden loading dock, his blood staining the planks that bore the precise construction of expert craftsmanship. The world spun around him, darkness creeping at the edges of his vision. He'd reached civilization, but his strength was failing. With the last of his energy, he pounded weakly on the wooden door. The door opened to reveal a woman in her late 40s, her auburn hair pulled back in a practical style, and her green eyes holding the steady competence of someone who'd learned to read both rock formations and the men who worked beneath the earth through years of frontier experience. She wore sturdy work clothes and moved with the confident efficiency of someone accustomed to handling any crisis the mining business could produce. A few strands of silver threaded through her hair, and fine lines marked the corners of her eyes, evidence of years spent squinting against the harsh desert sun. "Sweet Jesus," she breathed, taking in Bart's condition. Her Irish accent, softened by years in America, still colored her words. "What happened to you?" "Mining supervisor," Bart gasped through gritted teeth, his voice barely audible after days without water. "My own supervisor tried to kill me." The woman, he'd later learn her name was Kate O'Brien, helped him toward her supply depot with surprising strength. Her hands were calloused from years of hard work, but they moved with gentle precision as she lifted him. The scent of soap and machine oil clung to her clothes, a practical perfume that spoke of honest labor. Her operation was meticulously organized and equipped with safety equipment that demonstrated genuine commitment to miner protection, a stark contrast to the death trap operations that passed for mining in most frontier territories. The main room of the depot contained shelves of helmets, lanterns, support beams, and ventilation equipment, all arranged with careful attention to detail. "Your own supervisor did this to your legs?" she asked, examining the horrific injuries with hands that moved with gentle expertise. She'd seen mining injuries before. Crushed limbs, severed fingers, burns from explosions gone wrong, but the deliberate nature of these wounds made her stomach turn. "Caught him. Eliminating safety protocols. Didn't appreciate my interference." Bart's words came between ragged breaths. "Blackstone. Silver Consortium, killing miners for profit." Kate's expression darkened with recognition. She'd seen this kind of systematic worker endangerment before, the calculated sacrifice of human lives to maximize extraction profits. Her husband had died fighting against such practices, crushed beneath tons of rock in a preventable collapse. "Murderers," she muttered, reaching for clean cloths and a basin of water. They'd bury a man alive if it meant another ounce of silver in their pockets. She worked quickly, cleaning his wounds and assessing the damage. The injuries were severe. Bones crushed beyond repair, joints destroyed, muscles torn. Even if he survived, he would never walk again. But Kate had seen enough death in mining country to recognize the will to live in a man's eyes, and Bart Grimsby's blue eyes burned with determination. "You're safe now," she told him, her voice steady despite the horror of his injuries. "I'll not let them finish what they started." For 6 months, Bart drifted between consciousness and fever, while Kate tended his wounds with a mixture of frontier medicine and Irish folk remedies her grandmother had taught her. The small room behind her shop became his sick room, the window offering a view of the desert he'd nearly died crossing. She couldn't restore his legs. Too much damage had been done, but she managed to save his life and help him adapt to working from a specially constructed wheelchair she built from mining equipment. The fever dreams were the worst. Nightmares of sledgehammers and Blackstone's laughter, of miners trapped in collapsing tunnels while profit-hungry supervisors counted silver ingots above ground. He would wake screaming, convinced he was still in that torture chamber, only to find Kate's steady presence beside him, her hand cool against his forehead. "You're at Scorpion Wells," she would remind him, her voice anchoring him to reality. "You're safe." Slowly, painfully, he began to heal. The wounds closed, the fever broke, and his strength gradually returned. Kate brought him books on mining engineering and safety regulations, keeping his mind engaged while his body recovered. They would discuss the latest developments in mine ventilation and support structures, finding common ground in their shared commitment to worker safety. When Bart finally sat up clear-headed, he found Kate conducting what appeared to be a comprehensive safety inspection, checking equipment and procedures with the kind of systematic approach that had once been his specialty. Her supply depot was more than just a business. It was a model of how mining operations could be both profitable and completely safe. "You know mine safety?" he observed, watching her precise equipment checks and careful documentation procedures. Her movements were efficient, her assessments accurate. She tested a support beam, examining the grain and checking for weaknesses with the expertise of someone who understood that lives depended on such details. I know enough to keep miners alive and my conscience clear, Kate replied, organizing her safety records with professional care. The ledgers on her desk contained detailed information about equipment specifications and safety ratings. Out here, a dead miner means a dead family, and I sleep better knowing every piece of equipment I sell meets proper safety standards. Her story emerged slowly through their conversations over the following weeks. Kate was the daughter of Irish miners whose knowledge of underground safety dated back to the coal mines of County Cork. Her father had taught her to read the signs of danger in a mine, the subtle shifts in air quality, the almost imperceptible sounds of timber under stress, the warning signs that preceded disaster. She'd married an American mine safety engineer who'd been killed in a deliberately caused explosion when he'd tried to expose systematic safety violations by major mining operations, leaving her to continue his work with nothing but her inherited knowledge and her determination to prove that safe mining was more profitable than deadly mining. Men think Irish women can't understand engineering, she explained one evening as they sat by the artesian well, watching the sunset paint the desert in gold and crimson. She tested safety equipment with expert precision, her hands moving with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. They learn different, or they learn to dig their own graves. Bart told her about Blackstone's conspiracy, the eliminated safety protocols, the years of honest inspection repaid with crippling. He described the systematic dismantling of safety measures, support beams removed to save costs, ventilation systems compromised to increase extraction speed, warning systems disabled to prevent work stoppages. Kate listened without judgment, occasionally nodding as if she'd suspected such systematic endangerment existed. This supervisor Blackstone thinks miner safety is just an obstacle to profit? She asked, her voice tight with controlled anger. She'd seen the human cost of such thinking. Widows and orphans left destitute, communities devastated by preventable disasters. He thinks I'm a fool for believing in protective standards, too rigid to understand that safety inspection is about maximizing extraction, not protecting workers. Bart's voice was bitter, but there was determination beneath the anger. He told me the future belongs to men who understand that workers are replaceable, but silver is precious. Maybe he's right about one thing, Kate said, her tone thoughtful as she adjusted the wheelchair she'd built for him, improving its balance and maneuverability. Maybe the old way of mine safety is finished. Question is, what are you going to protect to replace it? The question hung between them, a challenge and an invitation. Bart had lost his legs, his career, his identity as a mine inspector. But he hadn't lost his knowledge or his commitment to worker safety. And in Kate, he'd found someone who shared that commitment, someone who understood that true mining prosperity came from protecting the men who risked their lives beneath the earth. Their partnership began when a series of catastrophic mine collapses threatened to destroy confidence in the entire territorial mining industry, with workers refusing to enter mines that had become synonymous with death and mutilation. The Silver Consortium's profits were plummeting as miners abandoned dangerous operations, choosing poverty over certain death. Bart's knowledge of federal safety standards and engineering principles, combined with Kate's understanding of practical mining and equipment supply, allowed them to establish new safety systems that protected workers while maintaining profitable operations. They developed innovative support structures, improved ventilation systems, and created emergency response protocols that saved lives during the inevitable accidents. You still know your trade, Kate observed as they watched miners return to work in properly secured mines for the first time in years. The men moved with renewed confidence, no longer expecting each shift to be their last. Families gathered at the mine entrance, no longer fearing that goodbyes might be final. No structural engineering, no federal regulations, know how to read the truth when timber supports lie, Bart replied, maneuvering his wheelchair with practiced skill while examining safety equipment. His upper body had strengthened during his recovery, compensating for his useless legs. Out here, that's still worth something. Word spread through the New Mexico territory about the supply depot at Scorpion Wells, where Kate O'Brien and the crippled inspector could solve problems that had stumped territorial mining authorities for years. Mine owners who cared about their workers sought their advice, while those who prioritized profit over safety avoided them like the plague. They developed a reputation for integrity that extended from the Sangre de Cristo Mountains to the Mexican border. Miners would travel for days to consult with them about dangerous conditions, knowing that Bart and Kate would provide honest assessments and practical solutions. Their recommendations saved countless lives and, ironically, increased profitability by reducing accidents and improving worker morale. More importantly, they found in each other something they'd both thought lost: professional companionship, shared purpose, and the deep love that comes from protecting vulnerable workers together against those who would sacrifice their lives for profit. Their relationship grew from mutual respect into something deeper, a partnership of equals united by common values and complementary skills. The confrontation with Supervisor Blackstone came 2 years later. He arrived with territorial officials and forged documents, claiming Bart was mentally incompetent due to his injuries and needed to be placed under Blackstone's care as his former supervisor. The Silver Consortium's profits had suffered from the new emphasis on safety, and Blackstone was determined to eliminate the source of his problems. "There's the old cripple," Blackstone announced, pointing at his former inspector. His expensive suit and polished boots were dusty from the journey, but his arrogance remained intact. Living in squalor with some Irish supply woman, probably can't even remember what a mine looks like anymore. Bart emerged from the supply depot, no longer the broken man Blackstone had tortured and abandoned. Hard work and purpose had strengthened his upper body, while finding his true calling had restored his confidence. His legs were ruined forever, but his mind was sharp and his voice carried the authority of genuine expertise. "Blackstone," he said calmly from his wheelchair, "you're looking prosperous. Does killing miners pay well?" "Don't get smart with me, Grimsby. I'm here on official territorial business." Blackstone waved a document bearing official seals. "The territorial governor has concerns about your mental state after your unfortunate accident." "Official?" Kate stepped out beside Bart, a rifle cradled in her arms. The weapon wasn't aimed at anyone, but her meaning was clear. "Funny thing about that. I sent some documentation to friends in Santa Fe and Denver. Seems the federal government's been investigating mining safety violations." Blackstone's confidence wavered as he realized they'd been building a case against him for months. Kate's connections throughout the mining community had provided access to safety violation records and witness testimony that painted a clear picture of systematic worker endangerment and deliberate safety protocol elimination. "This is a setup," Blackstone sputtered, his hand moving toward his gun. The territorial officials with him looked uncomfortable, beginning to suspect they'd been manipulated into participating in something illegal. "No," came a new voice from the mesa above. "This is justice." A federal marshal rode down into the valley, flanked by territorial investigators and several angry miners who discovered Blackstone's plan to use their safety concerns as cover for his systematic worker endangerment operation. The marshal was a tall man with a weathered face and eyes that had seen too much frontier justice to be impressed by Eastern money or corporate power. "Supervisor Blackstone," the marshal announced, "you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, worker endangerment, falsification of safety records, and attempted kidnapping." The confrontation ended without violence. Faced with overwhelming evidence and expert testimony, Blackstone's empire of mining death collapsed completely. His conspiracy had reached far beyond the original safety eliminations, involving systematic worker endangerment across multiple territories that had killed hundreds of miners and destroyed countless families. The federal investigation revealed a network of bribed officials, threatened inspectors, and falsified safety reports that stretched from Colorado to Arizona. He died in federal prison 18 months later, still claiming he'd only been trying to improve New Mexico's mining efficiency. His death notice appeared as a small paragraph in territorial newspapers, quickly forgotten by all except those whose lives he'd destroyed. "Feel better?" Kate asked as they watched the federal party disappear over the mesa, taking Blackstone to face justice for his crimes. The setting sun cast long shadows across the desert, marking the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. "Feels structurally sound," Bart replied, adjusting his wheelchair. The device had become an extension of himself, carefully engineered by Kate to provide maximum mobility and independence. "For the first time since they destroyed me, I feel like I'm truly supporting what matters." Their partnership deepened into something more profound than business or convenience. They established a mine safety service that served the entire territory, providing equipment inspection and safety consulting to anyone who needed it, regardless of their ability to pay standard fees. Miners' widows received free assistance, while wealthy mine owners paid premium rates that subsidized services for smaller operations. "We make quite a team," Kate observed one evening as they sat by the artesian well, watching the sunset paint the New Mexico sky in brilliant oranges and purples. The water reflected the colors, creating a mirror image of the spectacular display above. "We make security," Bart corrected, taking her calloused hand in his work-hardened one. Their fingers intertwined, strength meeting strength, the kind that protects rather than profits, that preserves rather than destroys. At 60, Bartholomew Grimsby was no longer the broken-down inspector who'd been crippled and left for dead by a murderous supervisor. He was a guardian of worker safety, a protector of mining families, and living proof that expertise could transcend physical limitations. His wheelchair had become a symbol of resilience throughout the territory, a reminder that some men couldn't be broken, even when their bodies were shattered. The desert that had nearly claimed his life had instead given him purpose, partnership, and the chance to use his knowledge for something greater than mere safety inspection. He'd found a new way to serve, a new definition of strength, and a love he'd never expected to discover in the harsh landscape of the New Mexico territory. And Catherine O'Brien had found something she'd thought impossible. Not just love, but professional partnership with someone who saw her Irish heritage as strength rather than stereotype, who understood that the strongest operations are built on respect for worker safety and the recognition that true prosperity comes from what you build, not what you bury. Her supply depot had become a center for mining innovation, where traditional knowledge met modern engineering to create systems that protected lives while extracting resources. Together, they'd carved out their own piece of the American dream in the rugged beauty of New Mexico's high desert, proving that sometimes the people society discards become the ones who provide the strongest foundations. Their supply depot became a landmark on the frontier, Scorpion Wells Safety Supply, where worker protection and mining excellence went hand in hand. The ore wagons still rolled past their well, carrying silver and dreams across the expanding West. But now they carried something else as well. The knowledge that there were still places where miner safety mattered more than extraction profits, where shattered legs couldn't shatter an unbreakable commitment to worker protection, and where two people who'd been written off by the world proved that the most valuable mines are those that are worked safely, operated properly, and managed by those who understand that in America, every miner deserves to return home alive. Every family deserves to keep their breadwinner. And every underground operation deserves the security that comes from proper safety protocols, adequate structural support, and the unwavering belief that no amount of silver is worth a human life, no profit margin justifies worker endangerment, and no mining operation succeeds unless it protects the men who risk their lives in the darkness beneath the earth.